Hi there, and welcome to Legacy Builders. I am your host, Matt Herriman. I'm so excited to dive into the stories of leadership, community building, and the legacies of individuals that they are creating across various sectors, with the goal of inspiring you, the listeners, by highlighting the power of community and others' stories. Let's get started. Well, guys, I am super excited to welcome my friend and community leader, coach, all the things, Coach Andy Herzer, to the Legacy Builders podcast. Coach, welcome.
Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super glad to have you and appreciate you making the time to do this. So, Coach Herzer, Andy Herzer, longtime D1 basketball coach, turned nonprofit leader, very well known, obviously, here in the Murfreesboro community. Spent time coaching at UNC-Asheville and then also at MTSU here in Murfreesboro. I guess we've really kind of gotten to know each other more over the past, year and a half, maybe at this point, maybe a little less. I guess it was last spring. Maybe I should back up even further. We'll get more into this, but Coach oversees an organization, founded an organization called First Shot, which is here in Murfreesboro, which is sports-oriented basketball. I guess it's more than a camp. I mean, it's about a month long, but
yeah, I would say it's it's a skills academy, the basketball side of it, but the real start of First Shot was the inner city piece and putting on camps and feeding children when they're not being fed. And, that's the heart of First Shot, of why we started it. The other is grown as a, offspring to help fund, what we do in our inner city here. So again, God put it on my heart when we were going through a Bible study with our Sunday school class, purpose-driven life. A lot of people have gone through that.
Yeah, Rick Warren.
That little tug, that he puts on your heart, and that led to my pastor and I sitting down and talking, Brother Don and I, and saying, "Why don't you start and why don't you run our Upwards program?" I said, "Well, I will do it as long as we can do it under the flagship of First Shot, since it's already had started the nonprofit, and." It has grown organically over 22 years of serving our community, but it's really God-driven.
Yeah.
The less of Andy's involved in it, the better it is.
Well, I tell you, so, obviously before our encounter in Panera last spring, my boys had been a part of First Shot, and just really is they absolutely love it. And, obviously the time of year that it is, which is basically all of January, sometimes we have winter weather here in Murfreesboro, and they just get so sad when it gets canceled because of snow or ice or whatever it is. But that's something they look forward to. And so that was really, I guess, our first kind of interaction. But, last spring, I don't even know what I was doing, but I was in Panera. I had an office near that Panera there on Old Fort, so I was probably just going to get my hazelnut coffee. And I saw you sitting over there. You had the Word open and reading, and it looked like you may or may not have been waiting or someone, or might have left. And so I just said, you know what, I'm going to go introduce myself to Coach. And, lo and behold, obviously, Murfreesboro is a small town, big city.
Absolutely.
And so sit down, start talking, and just, within a minute, I think we knew about half a dozen of the same people, and obviously there's even more now, but just a really cool first interaction. And I think from that moment, we immediately knew we were kindred spirits, brothers in Christ, shared values. And, I talk a lot on this show of just my core values being faith, family, community, and health. And I know that you share a lot of those as well.
What you're not doing, Matt, is embarrassing me on your podcast. Because really what it was is for 2 years, Matt had been coming to First Shot with his boys, but I only recognized his boys. And
they weren't with me.
I can't tell you how many people come up and say, hey, my son, my daughter, or whoever, and I don't recognize them because my focus, and you know this, when my focus is God placed those children in my care for that hour. My focus is solely on them, and I really don't care about the parents. And I know that sounds bad, but I can get really singularly focused. And so thanks for not embarrassing me.
Well, and so really from that moment on, you know, we've kept in touch. We get together, just talk about life, and just really love your heart for service and your heart for kids and also community, and just your willingness to and desire to give back, which a lot of that stems from your relationship with Christ and your love of him and the desires that he has given to you, which has manifested itself in those desires to be involved in kids' lives.
So, you know, I got to thank my dad. My dad was a godly man. When we were growing up, we'd go late to school because if we didn't do our morning devotion, we got there late. He'd walk us in. Principal would go, devotions. Dad go, yep. All passes to the classes for my two brothers and I. But he also always gave. You know, there was a Basher home about an hour away. We'd go up once a month. My dad was very involved in that because of his upbringing. And, you know, at 16, both his parents had passed. So basically he was living with his sister, but really an orphan. So my dad was always giving back in our community. So I learned it too. It was intentional. My younger brother, he's in with doing triathlons, but he has a special needs child that he does the triathlon with. Yeah. So it's kind of been put into us from my dad and my mom. They were great givers, and it's one of our core values is, you know, to be a giver. Yeah. And I think that's intentional. I think we got to train our children up to give. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's a lot of my story too. You know, my grandfather had a tremendous amount of influence on my life. As my mom's dad, he passed away last April. But I grew up in a small town in West Tennessee. Everybody in Bolivar, Tennessee, Hardeman County knew E.W. McKinney, and he was involved in Rotary and Kiwanis Club, and I mean, just everything on and off the planning commission through the years. And he owned a real estate and auction company. And so, you know, and here I am, you know, and he was also very active politically. And so, you know, here I am pretty active politically and, you know, running a real estate business. And so, just really in a lot of ways is my hero, but I saw him my entire life always giving back, always being part of something bigger than himself that was community focused. And so, you know, that's a great lead in to, you know, you talking about your dad and your mom, my grandfather, kind of the question we always ask every guest, which is, when you think of the word legacy, what does it mean to you, and how does it affect your approach to your work in life? Well, I think a lot of times we don't really start to think about legacy until you're in your fourth quarter. So you doing it at this young age is impressive. I would tell you at 64, the legacy to me is what you've put into someone. You know, I have had great men and women in my life that have put a lot into me, and I'm their legacy. And it's the same for us. My generation is what we put in to and mentor into our children, young adults, right? It's that legacy. And for me, I look at that legacy is that it should all point to glorifying God. And if it doesn't, then what I'm doing is worthless.
Yeah.
So again, it's why teaching God's word is so important to me, to all walks of life. And I've been mentored myself by a guy for almost 19 years. And, he's for 15 years saying, Andy, it's time for you to mentor other men. Well, God has a funny way of making that happen when it's supposed to happen. He opens that door, and he's opened it. And, I'm meeting with young men, some, my age and equal, and some that I'm training up and mentoring now. But it all goes back to, that purpose-driven life.
Yeah.
Well, our only purpose, really, truly, is to point everybody to a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And that relationship can only happen through his son, Jesus. So that's the legacy that you really want to have. First shot's a vehicle of it. I hope it continues after me. That's up to God and, himself, if he puts the right people in place. So again, legacy is something I think is what others have learned through you.
Yeah.
And hopefully some people have learned about God.
Yeah. Well, let's dive in a little bit to kind of your background and how you got to First Shot. So, obviously you spent over a decade coaching at the collegiate level. So what drew you to that world, and kind of what did you take from it?
Well, my story, and I've shared it many times. I had a guy I called my Uncle Roger and my Aunt Betty. They weren't my relatives. I mean, they weren't my blood relatives. But he was a sports writer in town, and when I was growing up in Indiana, basketball was king. And I was starting to get pretty good, and we'd every summer go somewhere for a basketball camp. Now, back then in the 70s, it was, maybe $150, 100 and a quarter for 5 days, 4 nights, all your meals, very inexpensive. But the one that my rising junior year that we were going to go to was going to cost $395. Well, my parents didn't have it. And my paper route money, my lawn money, they wouldn't let me touch. That was for college. Well, I, being the smart aleck 16-year-old boy, I said, well, I'm going to get a college basketball scholarship. And they said, well, you're going to have a backup plan to that. And that backup plan's that savings account, and you can't touch it. So they were sitting there, Uncle Roger and Aunt Betty, and so I got mad, stomped off, threw the brochure down. Next morning, Roger Gordon pulled up in his brand new spanking LTD, lime yellow, rolls down the window, and just a puff of smoke. He was a chain smoker. He said, get in. I'm going, oh, please don't make me get in, Uncle Roger. So I got in, and he handed me the brochure all filled out with a check and another check for my head coach for spending money to get gas and get us down there. Well, it's $500. And, obviously my dad had to humble himself. I'm sure Aunt Betty twisted his arm to get it done a little bit, because my dad could have been stubborn back in the day. But with that, I went to Carolina camp for 2 years. They paid for it. In that, Roy Williams, Hall of Fame coach, was in running my camps, where they shipped us off to Chapel Hill High School,
Okay.
basically.
Yeah.
And he ran those for me for 2 years, and his best friend got the UNC-Asheville job. Basically, Jerry Green, sight unseen through Roy Williams, said, offer him. So, I went and spent 4 years, playing ball at UNC-Asheville, graduated, got out, didn't know what I was really going to do. 6 months later, Jerry Green calls me back, said, hey, we can give you room and board and $300, and you can become a Division I college basketball coach. I said, okay, when do you need me there? He said, when can you get here? I said, I'll be there tomorrow. And, you laugh about that because, I love basketball. I love basketball more than I loved anything else. It became my God.
Yeah.
And so I got into coaching, and, your first year, you're just learning. And there's so much to learn. It's so different than sitting and playing. Everybody that says that they've played and they know, because they played, they have the knowledge to be a coach. Well, man, I was so green. But what I learned, I had 3 different head coaches, and I learned something unique and different from each one of them. Jerry Green was an unbelievable take a film, break a team down, and be able to put a game plan together to beat you. We beat people that we shouldn't have beat. When he had 2 days to prepare a team, he had to have a huge high percentage of winning. And, he went to Tennessee, and if he hadn't, probably talked too much, he still could have been coaching there. Who knows? Because he won a lot of games at UT.
Yeah.
The next guy was a guy named Don Doucette from Boston. And he was a unique individual. He was a street guy.
Yeah.
And just the way he talked, he was, but man, he knew how to recruit. And he taught me how to recruit. He taught me how to get into a home and how to read people and parents. Mm-hmm. And I was good at that, and became good at that because of Don Doucette. And so learned how to break film down. That's just one part of it.
Right.
Learned how to recruit. Then in comes Randy Will, which to me, the Carolina guys have an unbelievable way of breaking things down and putting them back together through practice planning. I learned stuff from him that I never knew, but all along, even in that 18 years of coaching, you're around people fundraising.
Yeah.
I learned so much when I came to middle, listened to so many of the middle people complain sometimes about how often they were asked, which now affects how I go about raising money for First Shot. I'm trying to get a one-time ask into people instead of asking 5 different times throughout the year.
Yeah.
And so it's all been, everything that you go through in life prepares you for what's next.
Yeah. And
so for me, it's, I didn't know I was going to go into a nonprofit world. I didn't. I went probably kicking and screaming because I didn't call it a ministry at first, Matt. I just said it was going to be my give back. Like I saw my dad give back all his life.
Mm-hmm. So what got you from UNC to middle?
Well, Randy Will was my head coach at UNC-Asheville. He got the job, and it was one of those things, Matt, that he thought I'd stay a little bit. Well, the AD called me in and said, Andy, don't apply. You're not going to get the job, which is a huge blunder on his part because I could have sued him, which I wouldn't sue anybody. But it made me go to Dr. Cochran and Dr. Yavakini, and I said, what this man said. Well, the whole team was going to Dr. Yavakini and Dr. Cochran saying, this is who we want. Well, we end up having a meeting with Dr. Yavakini and Tom Honeycutt. And, Tom said some things, and I just blankly looked up and said, "You're lying. That's not how it's happened." And I said, "I love this school more than you do because I played here, and my blood, sweat, and tears was all over North and South Carolina and Virginia."
Yeah.
And I said, so I can't go work now for a guy after I called him a liar, right? But I called him out in front of other people, which I've been known to do. It's probably one of my not so good qualities. And so Randy said, "Come on." So here I come to Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And, you know, things happen. We kind of had it going, then we didn't have it going. We had our best two players were hurt, and a new AD comes in, a new president comes in. And, you know, was always told by guys way wiser than me in sports that if that happens, get your resume updated. Yeah. So they made a change. And at that point in time in my life, because of family circumstances, I had gone through divorce. My kids had moved. I said, "I'm going to be grounded and stay here." Well, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. Murfreesboro is an unbelievably friendly, welcoming town. And I've been blessed by the people God's placed in my life.
Yeah.
And so again, stayed. Started working in the mortgage world, which I hated. I don't know how any
You
of
weren't
these,
a good salesman?
you know, here's my thing with it. When I got into it, I can tell you this. If you had a pulse, you could get a loan. Well, I couldn't do those. My heart it just didn't make sense for me.
Yeah.
And the other part, you know, and I won't say who, but they wanted you to upsell the rate and make
more money
for the bank or for your mortgage company. And I had a hard time with that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, well, and they'd look at me and said, "Andy, it's only $7.50 more a month." Well, that's not my money. So I kind of had that. And then and again, I just wasn't my passion.
Yeah.
So the real passion came when Dennis Phillips and we were working together in a mortgage company, and we go to hear Rick Ruby, probably the Bobby Knight of mortgage.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm sitting there just taking notes away, and Dennis is getting fired up, thinking I'm getting fired up about the mortgage industry. I get out and say, "Well, man, this is how I can do this for first shot. I can do this for first shot." Because I'd started it. And he looked at me and he just said, "Hey, you need to just go do first shot full time." Well, I said, "I have to make money." So my wife and I are sitting out on a deck, and she looked at me and she literally said, and I'll never forget, she said, "We can lose all this. This is just stuff." Mm. And she was pointing to our house. And, you know, so I went in. Dennis probably a little shocked that I said, "Okay, I'm done." Right there and then I was done. And just started in the first shot. Didn't make a whole lot of money. My first couple, 5, 6, 7 years in it. Still not making what most people would call a lot of money, but a good living to survive. But you know, I'm not going to store my treasures here.
Yeah.
And God's always provided a way for us. We never lost anything. It's been an amazing 22-year ride. You know, the blessings you get is when the kids come back. And I used to call him the mayor of Patterson. Won't use his name, but he called me about 3-4 months ago, and he said, "You know, Coach, I just want to say thank you for you showing up every summer, every fall break, every spring break, and every winter break, and investing in us." I look back now, I didn't appreciate it then like I do now.
Yeah.
But, you know, and I looked at him, I said, E, are you going to church anywhere? He goes, yes, sir. You going to get married? I said, okay. If you don't have a church, you can come visit with me. I'd love to sit next to you and worship God together. And he goes, I know you would, but we're good. My fiance and I are in church, plugged in. So that's why you do what you do.
Yeah.
It's why you do what you do. I mean, it's this, it doesn't have to be a ministry. I think we get, or a nonprofit. I mean, whatever you're in, that's your ministry.
Yeah.
God's going to put people in front of you, you know, that you can show them God's love, show them God's grace, show them God's mercy.
Yeah.
And point them towards him.
Yeah. So what was you've kind of alluded a little bit to it, but what was the birth of First Shot? What was it that said, I'm going to start this? And you kind of just talked about some of the beginnings of it, leaving mortgage and diving head first into it, but you had already created it. So what was kind of the birth of it, the purpose behind it initially, and then how has it changed? The
initial thing was just to give back.
Yeah.
You know, it goes back to my dad. If you're going to be in a community, give back. So I started a basketball camp, partnered with the Boys and Girls Club. Steve McKinney was the executive director at that time. And it birthed there. I did a week every year. Sometimes the bank I was working at didn't like that I took that week. But I took it and did it there for 2 or 3 years, and through some relationships met the superintendent of city schools, and she said, Andy, why don't you do it at Patterson? There's a huge community that's not being served.
Yeah.
The Boys and Girls Club has programming. They need stuff here. So, you know, I would say now, looking back, it's been about 17, 18 years I've been at Patterson Park. That's how it really got going, is at Patterson, and the connections I made there. And, you know, it just grew organically, just like everything. You know, people come up to me all the time, well, how did you start this? I said, one kid at a time.
Yeah.
And I think we get caught up in numbers. I don't ever say numbers to people. And there's a reason why. I think that's taken away from the glory of God. He knows who you've reached, and I don't have to say those numbers, but we've influenced children for now over 2 decades.
Over
2 decades. So, you know, hopefully we'll continue to get better doing it. You know, that's the thing. It's not what you've done in the past. It's what am I doing today to serve children and point them towards God. Yeah.
That impacts their life forever.
Forever.
Yeah.
Not me. God's word.
So I've heard you often say basketball is the least of what we do. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think I grew up in a state, and you know, it doesn't matter. Every state has maybe a thing, but at an early age, I can tell you, older guys were saying this is the next great.
Yeah.
And they put you on this pedestal, and that pedestal then becomes your God. But in it, you know, my parents tried to keep me grounded, but it was all the other influence of the world, right?
Yeah.
Telling you how good you are and how special. You know, I can look back and, you know, was I a great player? I was a great player in DeKalb County. It's a pretty small county. There are a lot of great players in the world is what I learned. And, but again, you're being fed this drug, which, you know, I've said a lot too that I love me some Andy, and that's my drug. People telling me, you know, what a great job I'm doing, and it's really not me. All right, it's just not. I have learned that, but back then I didn't know it.
Yeah.
And so now I get the college basketball scholarship. I'm playing. I'm starting. I'm having fun. I wasn't a great college player, but I got to always play. I wasn't driven as much then. I really wanted to coach. I loved when the other assistants were gone and Coach Green would say, okay, you sit beside me. And he'd turn and look at me and say, what do you think? I said, you need to put this player in or that player in.
Yeah.
And they'd go. And then I said, hey, we need to screen here, create something for Paul Allen, which was all American, and he was a great player. And again, just I enjoyed the game, the strategic side of it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where Jerry Green and I connected.
So you spent all those years coaching. When you kind of look back on that in context of what you do now, you alluded a little bit to it earlier. What are things that you have taken from coaching that you still use today leading First Shot?
Well, the camps and the Winter League, the basketball side of it, is all the stuff I learned through it, so it's still there. I think the other part of what I've learned is you have to surround yourself with better people than you. Yeah, you know, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I know a lot of smart people, and I think you got to surround yourself with them. You know, and be able to listen to their wisdom. And again, it's just been an unbelievable ride. In Murfreesboro and Rutherford County have been very, very kind to this fired assistant basketball coach. But that's what I am. You know, that's what I did. You know, I think sometimes we think more of ourselves than we should. And I think that's the key for me in life, is to stay humble, to stay hungry. Like I teach basketball skills very differently today than I did 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I'm doing different stuff because I'm always still trying to improve myself. And I think, you know, I'm driven in that way, that if I'm going to do something for children, I should provide the very best.
Yeah.
And so again, when we go and at Patterson Park, we have people teaching dance. I get two of the best dance instructors to teach it. I teach someone that's teaching character. I'm getting the very best guy to teach character. If it's soccer we're teaching or art, let's go find the very best at that.
Yeah.
And so that the kids can find a passion of what's in theirs. Because, Matt, I can go back to my 5th grade. I want to learn how to play the piano, but I have no musical aptitude.
Mm-hmm.
And my piano teacher looked at my parents and said, stop wasting your money. He'll never learn. It's okay. But see, we don't do that today. We don't tell parents, hey, basketball may not be for your child. Yeah. That's okay. He can enjoy it or she can enjoy it.
Yeah.
But be honest with them. I think we overpraise a lot in America. And again, you're stealing that kid's from finding what his passion is.
Yeah. What his true abilities are.
And I've even told parents this: you need to find another gym. Your son or daughter's too good for this gym.
Yeah.
And I do it on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And they look at me like I'm crazy, because that's partly how we fund First Shot, right? As those children come in to First Shot. So again, I think God has given me a path and some wisdom and discernment to surround myself with the right people and to do the right things for children.
Well, I think something you said is really a mark of a really great leader. And not to puff you up, but I still think back, I was really active in several organizations during my time at the University of Tennessee. And one of those organizations, every semester, fall and spring, he's known at least around Knoxville, as Big Jim Haslam, but it's Governor Haslam's dad who, started Pilot. It's over a several billion-dollar company. And, an ultimate, what I would say is a go-giver. There's a book called The Go-Giver. Just always wanted to give back, always wanted to pour into the next generation. And I remember one semester him coming and speaking, and it was kind of on leadership, this particular one. And again, here's a billionaire sitting in front of a group of probably 20 or 25 college kids. And he's one of the pieces of advice that he gave was what you just talked about, was I want to make sure that I am surrounding myself with people who are a lot smarter than me, because that's what's going to take this company to the next level. That's what's going to take myself to the next level, because they're going to push me to be better. And I still, it obviously had a mark on me, because I can remember him sitting on the table in the Haslam business building, just very vividly, him sharing that, because I think there's a lot of humility in that as well. And a lot of times people who get into positions of power, leadership, whatever it is, they forget about the people that helped them get there, who had an influence on them. He's another guy that's been on the shows, obviously had tremendous influence on me, is a guy named Shane Reeves, who you also know. But I don't know if we even talked about this on his episode, but in his office at 12 Stone here in town, he has, when you walk into his office, you'll see probably a dozen or 2 dozen pictures, probably closer to 2 dozen pictures of just individuals. And he calls that his wall of gratitude. And he's got kind of a cheesy picture of Jesus, but he's got family members and friends and business partners and people who have, as he's sitting at his desk, that's what he sees. When he looks up from his desk, he sees all those people. So as he is running this organization, those are people that helped him get to that seat.
Well, I'd say the thing that, you asked me what I took from basketball. There's some things I didn't take. Right. I think one of the biggest problems in college coaches, they surround themselves with yes people, and they never get any fresh ideas. And the staffs that are okay with conflict, and I think we've been taught to avoid conflict. Yeah. Conflict's not a bad thing if it's sharpening us. Yeah. Right. And so for someone to tell me, Andy, that's wrong thinking, and here's why, I think those are important things, so that, again, I'm not perfect, so therefore first shot can't be perfect, but it can do still God's will and work if I surround myself with people that will call me out.
Yeah. That's good. So let's last maybe 5 minutes here. We've talked a little bit throughout this about mentorship and faith. And I think those are, personally, and because I've been impacted by those things of people saying, I'm going to pour into Matt Herriman. And I know you, and some stories that you've told already today, have been impacted by the power of mentorship. So it clearly means a lot to you, means a lot to me. So, how has that shaped the way that you lead through First Shot, and even maybe beyond that?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I said for years and years, I'm in a kids ministry. I'm not. Well, no, I'm in whatever God calls me to.
Yeah.
And we limit ourselves. And see, I never thought I could mentor men, or did I want to mentor men? Well, what if God wants you to? He's going to find a way that you're going to be in it. It's not going to be up to you if you're trying to seek God's will for your life.
Yeah.
And so at the end of the day, I would tell you this is I'm trying to just seek his will for my life and let him lead me. And that's really hard for a coach because we want to lead. And so it's that surrendering of leadership, that it's his ministry, not Andy Herzer's ministry. And that's been a shift for me in the last 2 years.
It's good. So as you reflect over the past few decades, and this may be a hard question, it's a little broad, but what is the most, or a couple of the things that you're the most proud of when you look back over the last 20 plus years?
Wow. Proud is one of those things that, again, I think gets me in trouble, Matt. But things that I can celebrate is when
things that God's done through you.
That I can celebrate is that the men and women that have been put in my life, and how much richer it is. And the richness is that I'm not just in one particular group.
Yeah.
I mean, people all the time say, man, you're in so many different groups, you know, rich or poor, black or white. It's, I don't see all those things.
Yeah.
I just see them as God's creation. He's put them here for a reason. And I'm just supposed to love them. You know how we start everything at First Shot. What's my job?
Yeah.
And they're going to answer to love us. And I just hope God's love pours out of me to the people that I'm around.
Yeah. That's great. Well, as we wrap up here, as I do with every guest, what are you currently reading or doing to further your personal development?
I feel, for me, Matt, I'm started so late in life getting into God's Word.
Yeah.
All right. So for me, our church is challenged to read through the Psalms. I'm reading through the Psalms right now.
Yeah.
I still meet twice a week. I'm in a navigators program, and in that we're in our second 60 memory verses.
Okay.
That we're going through. And then again, it's somebody will throw something my way, or a podcast, and hey, listen to this. And, I will say this, that, God has been so good, and here's how it evolves. I told people that I've gone through divorce. Both my kids were raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I had very little influence over them, right? Except when they were with me. My son has gotten a job at a small Christian school that's a startup, a charter Christian school up in Pittsburgh.
That's great.
As a PE teacher. And they have, in their class, they've got to teach God's Word.
Yeah.
Fast forward, Hayden and I are now, my son Hayden and I are meeting devotion on those verses that he is going to teach. So now I'm mentoring my son, who I had no spiritual influence on, except they knew how I lived.
Yeah.
And so it's that to me is more about legacy, fruit. Both my children, all three of my children, love Jesus. And my granddaughter has been baptized at New Vision.
Yeah.
So she loves Jesus. So, that's legacy also to me.
Love it. Well, Coach, thank you for your time. Thank you for what you do for our community and really just the kingdom.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. See you guys next time. Thank you for listening to another episode of Legacy Builders with Matt Herriman. Be sure to go like, follow, and subscribe on your favorite platform, and we would just love it if you left us a 5-star review as well. We'll see you next time.